All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to Mike Emporium's third interview. This one will be with Paul, and he did our cover for Dissolution and the Five Phase War, which one of them you can see it behind me at least. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good, thanks, mate. Not bad, it's not
All
bad.
right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for taking the interview. I mean, hey.
No worries.
All right. Let's start with our first question. Where are you from?
From Guildford in the UK,
Okay.
but currently residing in Brighton.
I'm out here in Indiana right now, so.
Yeah, I've never been to the States actually.
Mm.
Have you
I
been
went
to the UK?
Oh yeah, I've been to the UK at least once. Loved it there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got its plus sides and its negatives, I guess.
Rained a little too much for me though, so.
Yeah. It's there's a good chunk of the year where it just pisses it down all the time.
When did you begin having interest in art?
I started. I drew a lot when I was a kid, like say from a real young age, probably about 8 or 9, and I don't know. I guess I was just naturally creative minded. I struggled to focus on anything academic. So my mind would wander, a bit of a head in the clouds kind of person. And then didn't draw for years. When I was about 14 years old, I started getting into music, and started learning instruments and playing in bands. So from the age of 14 to about 30, I was a touring musician, just sort of playing in bands, trying to release records and do this, that, and the other. And then when I got to 30, I sort of was growing tired of the lifestyle of being in a touring band. Like, you don't get to see your family, you don't get to see your friends, and it's hard to make a living. You know, you don't earn much money. So I figured I needed to do something else, but not being very academic and not having any real qualifications, the only thing I could really think to do was to go back to my old passion of doing artwork. So I signed up for university and started doing a degree in graphic design.
All right, so you like trained professionally and picked it up as you went like that too?
I mean, you know, probably a bit of both, to be honest, mate. I did an art course that was a year long to get onto my graphic design degree. Then I did a 3-year degree in graphic design. But really, you know, I don't know what it's like in the States, but in the UK, like, a degree is just, it's more like another word for a chunk of time where you get to figure stuff out for yourself. Like, you do go to lessons and you do have lectures, but it doesn't really teach you much unless you're willing to really push yourself, motivate yourself.
Like apply yourself like that. Yeah.
Totally. You know, the course that I did started with like 70 people, and by the time the degree had finished 3 years later, there was about 15 of us left.
Wow.
So you really had to be self-motivated, and because I was older, I'd had a lot of jobs I hated, and I knew what was at stake. I knew if I didn't get the degree, then I was going back to that kind of lifestyle, which I hated. So I just pushed myself real hard, and I was really influenced because I come from the music scene as well. I was really influenced by a lot of artists that had come up through that scene. You know, artwork and music go pretty hand in hand. You get a lot of poster artists. You know, I do most of the work that I do is for music. You know, it's record covers or gig posters, that sort of stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, just being part of the music scene had really spurred and inspired me to follow my artwork and try to make something of that, now that I knew that I didn't want to carry on being a musician, sort of thing.
How would you classify your art style?
Just contemporary, I guess. Like, it's because it is deeply rooted in music and I guess alternative culture in a very general way. It's contemporary. A lot of people that do gig posters and stuff like that would describe their art as I guess sort of maybe psychedelic or I don't know. I'm not very good at classifying my own art. I don't seem to look at it the same way as everybody else does, to be honest. Like, people will say, "Oh, I really like your stuff because it's like this or it's like that," and 9 times out of 10, I think, "Is it?" I don't really see that. But I guess that's the thing about art, isn't it? Like, people just they see what they.
It's all subjective,
Exactly. They see what they want to see. They have their own take on things, and that's kind of what's so cool about it. It hasn't really got any boundaries.
Have you ever worked for any major companies or anything like that?
Yeah, I've just last year I did an album cover for a band called Villagers, which came out on Domino Records. So I've done some work for Domino Records. I've done lots of work for record companies, sort of independent record companies, big and small. Did a record cover for a band called Mastiff, who are kind of a sludge, sort of grindy sludge band. They put their record out on E1 Heavy, which is quite a big label. And I've done work for BBC Six Music and
Nice.
some work for the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Just a few people. Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. I've done some work for him.
Could you walk us through your creative process?
Yeah, so normally, because it's music related, the majority of the work I do, a band or a client will give me a brief. They'll give me some music or some lyrics and sort of outline the concept of their album, if there is a concept. And I take that brief and I go away and I basically go on the internet or I look through books, and whilst I'm looking through them, I find as many images as I can, and whilst I look through them, I try to relate the subject matters that are in the brief to the images that I'm seeing. I try to make a mental connection between the image and what I'm seeing. Obviously you go through a lot of images where there's no connection whatsoever, but my mind's pretty good at finding links between things. So even if they're really, really tenuous, I can normally bring things together and make them quite coherent. So for instance, with the Villagers cover, the album was called Fever Dreams, and I found some pictures of bears, and I then found some pictures of swimming pools. So I created an image of a giant bear sleeping next to a swimming pool with a guy floating on a lilo on the swimming pool, and it's like, and then I drew sort of dots coming from the bear and dots coming from the guy, and the dots represented the dreams. And cover, it's kind of like it's a fever dream in itself, but you're not sure whether it's the bear that's dreaming or if it's the guy that's dreaming, or if it's someone else that's dreaming of the bear and the guy. A bear image and a pool image wouldn't necessarily equate to the words fever dreams, but I'm good at finding those links. So once I've found a link, I then find some reference images, and then I sketch up some ideas and I send them off to the client. And the client, sometimes I come up with a couple of ideas, sometimes I have a spur of inspiration and I send them quite a few ideas, and normally in that pile of ideas and sketches, there's something that the client's like, yeah, that's the one, or maybe this will work, but if we could tweak it and do a bit of this, bit of that. So then, yeah, after a few chats with the client and the sketches, we nail a solid idea down, and then it's just a case of drawing it. And for that, like I say, I use reference images, and I draw straight into Photoshop using a tablet. And then I spend many, many, many hours listening to music and with movies on in the background, doing all the fun details.
I don't know how to do the music in the movies when I write sometimes, so I can understand that.
Yeah, it's nice to feel like there's some activity in the room. I think if it's a particularly hard project, sometimes I do it silent, but I like to have something going on in the background.
Is there anyone in your industry that you look up to, like in your field?
Yeah, loads of people. Like when I was in uni and I was studying graphic design, I was just, always on the hunt for new artists and looking at their work and thinking, how are they achieving that? That looks really cool. How can I, take those techniques and apply it to my art so that I can improve what I'm doing? People like Ken Taylor, Daniel Danger, Kevin Tong. I mean, there's just so many artists out there. Nico Delort. Yeah. My flat's full of prints by these artists. It's like it's exactly the same as when you're a kid and you're getting into music, and then you love those bands and you start your own band and you start off trying to sound like those bands, and then in doing that you eventually find your own sound and your own niche, and you become your own thing. It's exactly the same process. I think in some ways, because I'd grown up being and playing in bands and music, I understood how that process works and how I could apply it to art, and follow the same path but with illustration as opposed to playing an instrument.
All right. Reminds me a little bit of what the creator at Deadpool said. The first time you come up with something, you usually take a little bit from everything, and then from there you create something, and it transforms as you continue to do it.
100%. That is the process. I think when you grow up and maybe people that aren't creative or I find a lot of people that are maybe more academic and not so creatively minded, that find art and the creation of art a bit baffling. I find they tend to overthink it, or they tend to think that creative people are just brilliant in some way and understand, and just these ideas come from some sort of
just nowhere.
But it's not. It's just hard work and practice, like anything else you do in life. You start off and you're not very good, and if you have a passion for it, you're going to keep doing it, and the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And, there's no mad trick to it. There's no, I'm not an idiot savant or anything like that. I just spend a lot of time doing it.
It's just working on your craft. I have to ask, why Spilt Milk Designs?
It's so long ago now. Like it's hard to really remember. Like I've been going under that moniker for a long time. But I think it's something to do with, I was a bit of a crybaby when I was a kid, and I needed something. Didn't want to use my own name because my own name is Paul Phillips, and that's about as dull as it gets as far as names go. So I wanted something that was short, punchy, but people would potentially remember. So yeah, I just thought, why not slap in a little bit of self-depreciation there and refer to my crybaby nature.
It's catchy, something you remember every time like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? So when you're trying to start a business and when you're trying to create something new, one of the first things you think about is, like, how do I get this into other people, and how do I make it stick? So it's got to be short, and it's got to be words that people aren't going to forget, and it kind of that in itself, those limitations kind of narrow things down enough for you to be able to.
No, yeah.
I just wanted something that I wasn't going to hate in 20 years, I don't really think about it anymore now. So,
all right. Is your style more like fantasy realism when it comes to your art? I think you've answered that just a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say fantasy, but definitely there's a big surreal element to it. A lot of my work plays with the idea of scale. I like themes of beguilement. I've grown up dealing with anxiety and depression a lot, and so the majority of my work is somewhat metaphorical for dealing with those things. Lots of imposing elements of size, like I draw a lot of giant things next to small things, and things that are on the brink of something, and elements as well, like nature elements. I don't think I specifically chose to do those things, but they're just images that I find arresting. And there's a lot of photographers that I really like, and I'm a total cinephile. So I do a lot of photography, so I'm really interested in the composition of images. And there's a photographer called Gregory Crewdson who does these amazing pictures. They look like film stills,
Wow.
But they're not. They're just he gets in like whole lighting crew, like you would do for the production of a film. It costs him thousands and thousands, and then he just takes one picture. But if you look his work up, it's got this real sort of surrealness to it, but it's always set in. They're always set in sort of suburban locations. I really like that, almost like Nightmare on Elm Street. Like I really like that dream-like suburban underbelly. David Lynch, that kind of that kind of half asleep reality where things seem okay but then not quite. So I try to sort of inject that into my work if I can.
Cool. How long would you say it takes you to finish a piece, and have you ever had to just trash it and completely start over?
It does vary. Sometimes I do merch designs for bands and t-shirts and stuff, and I tend to do those just one color, so they don't take too long. They can be like 3 or 4 days of solid drawing. The stuff I did for you, the 2 book covers I did for you, we're looking at probably about 2 weeks, so 9 to 5. But I say 9 to 5. I always end up drawing till like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm a bit of a perfectionist in that sense. Like I don't create perfect images, but I'll keep going until I'm happy. So yeah, it can. I think the longest piece I ever did took about 2 months of solid drawing. But on average, we're like, especially when I do like record covers for bands, it's normally a week to 2 weeks, depending on if it's one side or the full gatefold. And yeah, I when I first started out, I did there's a band called Goat Snake who played a show in London, and I did a gig poster for that of a big sort of like galleon, but it was floating and going up, floating above a cityscape, and it's very detailed. I was just figuring out how to use Illustrator, and I basically hadn't set my file up properly. I'd spent like 2 weeks doing this illustration, and then I went to save it, and the whole thing crashed, and I lost a lot.
Oh.
Yeah, I think everyone who uses these programs or who relies on technology to create something that takes a long time it's like a rite of passage almost, like yeah. People always say to you, you got to save, or you got to save regularly, or you got to back stuff up, and you think, yeah, of course I'll do that, but then you just don't, and then you have an experience like that, and it haunts you. So from then on, you do. You're just like, I'm going to save like every 10 minutes from now on. Yeah. So now it's just become habitual, and I save constantly, and I back up constantly. But when you first start out, the way you set your files up are a mess. You never save stuff. It's chaos.
I've done like written scenes before, and like you said, the computer crashes, and then you have to go back and rewrite the whole thing, but it's never the same words. It never has the same feel, So
yeah. I mean, I was quite lucky that I'd saved a JPEG of the image, so I just basically imported the JPEG and then just traced it. So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like drawing it from scratch per se, but it took the same amount of time. And it was sometimes when you're doing very detailed work and you're drawing lots of dot work or lots of line work to create texture, you can find yourself sat there for 12 hours just going line, and that gets pretty monotonous. And I would say that like my illustration styles, like when I'm drawing, it's like 80% of that time is monotony, just drawing lines, and then
you just kind of get lost in it a little bit.
Yeah, you go into a bit of a zone, and then the last 20% where it all comes together, that's where the real joy is. When you start putting the colors in and it starts coming to life and getting depth, and you can feel yourself getting closer to the end products. That's the good bit. But the whole first week and a half, you're just bored shitless. Why movies in the background and music is so essential.
Do you see yourself at the top of your game, or are there things you would like to improve on?
I think I'll be surprised if any artists consider themselves as at the top of their game. Like, I think it's an inherent part of being an artist to always be chasing something better and to always be trying to progress. I think the very thing that makes you get to sort of pursue art for long enough to actually get good at it is the same thing that will make you always pursue doing better. There's a certain drive involved that's inherent in you as a person, and that's never really going to go away. So yeah, I mean, I definitely not at the top of my game. There's artists that I see their work and I'm baffled by how they're achieving what they're achieving, and all I want to know is how they did it. So I spend a lot of time trying to emulate that and trying to figure out what they've done, and not to copy, but because that's how I learn. So I think there's always stuff to learn, and when you feel like you've learnt it all, then you need to just start looking in a slightly different direction, and there'll be more to learn off there. It's infinite, it's an infinite learning curve, basically.
It's a little bit like that horse running through the desert with the water right in front of his face, and you just keep going and going and going.
Yeah. I think it's just like the idea of reaching an end point just is ludicrous. Like you're not going to reach an end point. You're just going to keep on going, and then one day you'll die, and then whatever you've left behind will be there for others to look at. But you'll never reach an end goal. There's never any sort of Ray, I made it kind of scenario.
Are there any myths about being an artist that you'd like to dispel?
Yeah, this one comes up quite a lot, actually. Like the idea that it's talent based. Like I get that. I mean, people disagree with me. I've had discussions with close friends where they said, no, there's got to be something in you. There's got to be some kind of talent involved for you to get good at it. And I just outright don't agree with that. I think if you have a passion for something, if it's something you really want to do, then you will spend a lot of time trying to do that, and eventually you will get good at it. It just, the only thing is it varies from person to person how long that period of time is.
Yeah.
So, you could have somebody who's maybe super smart, they're going to pick stuff up quick, they're going to get good quick. Somebody else who's not so smart, it's going to take them longer, but I don't doubt that they couldn't one day get to the same point as somebody who's smarter than them. It's just a matter of the amount of time it takes to get there. So
based on want, like that.
Sorry?
It's based on want.
Yeah, and perseverance, and whether you're willing to put the hours in. Like, if you're willing to put the hours into something, you can get good at anything, really. Provided you have the opportunity. But I don't think it's something that, I don't think people are born and they're naturally good at stuff. Like, they may pick stuff up quicker because they're smarter or more adept, but I don't think the idea to me that the word talent, like when somebody says to me, oh, you're so talented, after they've seen a picture that I've spent 2 weeks slaving over and I've spent years honing my skills, it's like, that's not talent. I've worked really hard for that. And the idea that it came easy to me is almost insulting, but I don't take it personally because they don't know. But yeah, it's kind of a crap word, talent. It's cheap.
What do you see as the hardest and the easiest parts of your job?
Easiest part of my job is that I get to do what I always wanted to do. Like, as I said earlier, I'm no spring chicken. I didn't start my degree until I was 30. Prior to that, I was playing in bands, and you don't earn a lot of money playing in bands, so you have to work a lot of dead end shit jobs. So I've done more than my fair share of horrible jobs, working in offices, doing removals, customer facing jobs, call centers, that kind of stuff. I've had a lot of jobs over my life that have made me unhappy. And there's a lot of people out there that haven't pursued a path in life to get them out of that situation and still in jobs like that. For me, I knew I had to get out of that situation because I psychologically couldn't handle working in jobs like that. So the easiest part of my job is waking up in the morning and knowing that I don't have to go to that kind of job. Like, I can just sit on my couch, put a record on and draw. And that to me is invaluable. That keeps me sane. So that's the easiest part. I think you've frozen.
Well, I can still hear you. There you go.
Cool. And what was the other part of the question?
What would be the hardest part?
The hardest part? Probably... it's a tough one because there's a couple of negatives to doing what I do, but compared to the negatives that I've had in previous jobs, they don't seem to be worth mentioning. Almost. You have awkward clients sometimes, clients that just want to tweak, and it's like, you've already been paid and you don't really want to charge them for all these extra tweaks, so you have to sort of be as diplomatic as possible and explain, I'd like to keep on tweaking this for you, but it takes time, and so conversations like that I don't particularly relish.
But it looks good this way, and I'm like that.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I guess clients that don't trust you to do your job, like
Mm.
I don't. It's these days it's rare that I get clients like that, because 9 times out of 10 when they hire me because based on the work they've seen, and they know that that's what they want. But you do still get the odds client. Working with musicians, they're creatives, so they like to feel like they've got a big input, and they like to feel like they're contributing in some way. And sometimes they can overstep the boundary a little bit and want too much control, which is, it's a bit of a grey area, because it's their project, it's their cover, so you feel obliged that you have to do what they want. But at the same time, you're the artist, and you know what's going to look good and what's not going to look good. And sometimes they'll come up with ideas which aren't going to work, through experience and through doing this for years. But they really want to see, so you kind of have to do it anyway. And drawing for hours on end, knowing that you're going to show it to them and they're going to be like, yeah, actually, you were right. Like, let's go back to where it was originally. That can be a bit of a kicker sometimes, So yeah, it's when clients don't fully trust you to know your end of the deal, that can be a little bit hard, but part of the job, man. And it's, like I said before, it's way better than stacking shelves in Tesco's. So,
When you did the covers for the 5-Phase Woe, which is the Azathoth one, and the Yggdrasil Tree of Life piece, did you use any special techniques?
No special techniques. I have a process that I've figured out over probably 10 years of designing now. So it's a pretty distilled process that I trust and I can rely on. Azathoth was a difficult one, because I use reference images. I can't just draw what's in my mind, so I need something to guide me to some degree. So I had to, and obviously it's not like you can go to your local park and find an Azathoth busting around and take a picture of.
Just find an old guy somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to find the elements and piece it together. So I've got a book of various amphibious skulls, and I found some pictures of buckets of eels, and so I created a sort of a template and a guide with those elements, and cut them up in Photoshop and placed them together. And I just built the image out of lots of different little images. So sometimes I have to do that. If you can't find a photograph of the thing you're trying to draw, or you can't take a photograph of the thing you're trying to draw, then you have to build it from other photographs, smaller pieces. But it's always possible. I'm yet to find something that I couldn't draw. So.
All right. Besides, like the album cover, stuff like that, have you ever had your work featured, anywhere else?
I did a movie poster for the film Winter's Bone by Deborah Granick, at the BFI, the British Film Institute in London, and I entered a competition there. It was the Bird's Eye competition, which is a film festival geared towards female film directors. And I won a competition there, and I had my Winter's Bone poster displayed at the British Film Institute for about a month, I think it was. I've had some film work I've done, because I do like moving image work as well, separately. So I've flown to Nepal and made a documentary on some humanitarian work that goes on out
Wow.
there. And I've made a few music videos, which have been featured on various, alternative music websites and magazines, publications. I've had some stuff in Kerrang magazine, stuff featured on BBC Six Music's website. I've had a few things. Yeah, every now and again you get a cool little job where you're going to get some sweet exposure. The Villagers album cover was a big one because Domino's quite a big label, and so the album cover was all over tube stations, big billboards and stuff like that. That was cool to see. I had friends texting me from the tube station in London because they'd seen my work on big billboards and stuff. That was kind of cool.
I didn't know about, your music background before I wrote down this question, but who is your favorite artist and your favorite music genre?
I mean, I've got pretty wide tastes, and at the risk of giving a non-answer, like favorites change on a weekly basis. I listen to a lot of music. I've played a lot of music. Designing record covers opens you up to a lot of music. I listen to a lot of folk music, a lot of jazz, a lot of punk, metal, post-punk, hardcore, nice. Everything really. I spent probably 4 years working for a company called 1 Inch Badge, who are now called Form, which actually they put on a lot of music events, gigs and stuff around in the UK. So I've done a lot of work for them, so I get exposed to a huge volume of music and different acts and stuff. So yeah, my favorite tends to be the thing I've fallen in love with most recently, which changes because I get exposed to so much. I'm trying to think if I really there's a band called The Liars. Last year they brought a new record out called The Apple Drops, which I really, really love that album. There's also a band from the States called Bachelor, which I think they're from Canada actually, which just like a two-piece with a backing band, and they're really cool. They had a really good album, just kind of indie sort of pop, guitar-based stuff. But at the same time, I listen to a lot of horrendously heavy stuff as well. So I listen to a bit of everything, man. You kind of have to when you design album covers for a living.
Nice. With that, that's our last question. I'm gonna send over you like a present from us. One of our most recent books, Dissolution. It's the cover you did for the Tree of Life.
Awesome.
And I'll send that over via email. WeTransfer.
Excellent. Thank you.
If you want to hit end on the recording right now, we're all good.
Cool.